talking about elements of civilizations. And the first thing that we're going to discuss is culture. So, when we think about culture, culture is the way of life. It's the language, the tools, the skills, the traditions, the food and drink, the music, the stories that people have developed over time and that they end up leaving to their children. So, how do the characteristics or the elements of culture affect civilizations? As we take a look at civilizations, we're also going to be examining their culture. We're going to be looking at conflicts that arise both within civilizations and amongst multiple civilizations. We're going to be looking at the environment and how the environment impacted the culture of certain people. For example, India is basically cut off from the rest of the world for a majority of time because of the geography surrounding it. How did their environment affect the development of their culture? We're going to look at social organization, how culture impacts the way that societies organize themselves socially. We're going to look at technology. We'll be discussing modes of expression, how different cultures express themselves, not only in just their reactions to things, but how do they express the stories and their values and their ideals. We're going to be looking at values in religion. How do people's values, how does the religion that they believe in affect their culture, which in turn affects their civilization? We're also going to be looking at politics and law. Your culture, your cultural values affect things that you believe are fair and unfair, things that you believe should be law. It affects the politics, the people that you vote for or elect as your leaders. And we're also going to be looking at the organization of the economy and how culture has an impact on that. So when we talk about interaction among cultures, we're going to be talking about a couple different things. The first is culture diffusion. And culture diffusion is the spread of a people's way of life, their customs, their beliefs, their religions, the language and government and family structure, and how that spreads not only throughout a civilization, but how it can spread to other civilizations. A really great example of this is the Silk Road. And the Silk Road was a trade route that we'll talk about when we get to ancient China, and how it was not only responsible for spreading new achievements, it helped spread ideas, it helped spread religion, and this all has to do with culture diffusion. We're also going to be talking about ethnocentrism, and this is when you judge another culture based on the perspective of your own culture. So the belief that one's own race or ethnic group is basically more important, and that some or all of the aspects of your own culture are superior to those of other groups. As we look at these other civilizations throughout the year, we're going to be looking at them from a non-biased view. We will compare the beliefs and the achievements and things that they had in their civilizations to our own, but more to see things that we've adapted or adopted as time has progressed. I think that we are going to find that we had a lot of misconceptions about some cultures and some civilizations, and hopefully this year we will put those to rest. So we've been talking about the Paleolithic and the Neolithic eras. And I want to just give a quick review of the Neolithic revolution. So, this is when we had the Paleolithic people, the nomads, move to more of a farming lifestyle, and people began to settle down and not move around as much. We know that nomads moved from place to place in search of food, they were hunter gatherers, and as they began to settle down in one location, because they became farmers, what we end up seeing is the birth of civilization in different areas throughout the world. So, once settlement finally begins, I want you to think about why would people settle near rivers? Almost all of the ancient civilizations that we're going to discuss this year have people settling by rivers. Why would they do that? Water supply. The rivers not only provided them with drinking water and an ability to fish to provide themselves with food. But a lot of times, what we see with these rivers is that these rivers would flood. And when they would flood, they would leave behind silt. Silt is basically a substance that's left behind that comes from, it's like the dirt from the river that is filled with nutrients. And when it floods over an area of land, when the river floods over an area of land, that silt is left behind, and this makes for extremely good farming. So, the very first civilization that we see developed along the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. We're going to be talking about this first civilization next week. We can see here are the Tigris and the Euphrates River. They're actually located in the Middle East, and this is where we're going to see one of the births of the earliest civilizations, and we're also going to see this around the Fertile Crescent. That's another name for this area. So, really quickly, let's talk about early farming methods, because as people started to settle down and become farmers, they had their own ways of doing things, and they had to develop these through trial and error. One of the ways that early farmers would clear fields is through the slash and burn method. So people would clear the fields by cutting down and burning trees and grasses. And this actually helped to fertilize the soil because the ashes that were left over made the soil more rich so that crops would grow. Another method of early farming was irrigation. Now, we still use irrigation today, and irrigation was bringing water to the fields in various ways. So one of the methods that early civilizations used was by digging canals and digging ditches. And because of this, they were able to have their fields further away from the rivers, but still provide water to their crops. Here's an example of the slash and burn method. There are still farmers and people who use this method today. A lot of times farmers will burn off a field on purpose, and that helps fertilize the soil and make it better for crops to grow. Now, we kind of had an overview of grapes the other day, but I wanted to put this slide in here so that you could see the shared features of civilizations. When we're talking about civilizations and early civilizations, we're going to see how these societies moved from just starting to live in an area and become farmers to actually being classified as a civilization, which means we're going to have the rise of cities. We're going to have some form of government come into play. Many of these early civilizations are the beginnings of what we consider modern religion today. We're going to see people start to specialize in certain types of job skills. So you're going to have people who start specializing in farming. You're going to have people who start specializing in the development and the making of certain tools. You're going to have people who become barterers or traders. We're going to see culture start to develop as a whole. We'll see the invention of writing, and we'll see how writing is invented in different cultures and how that's different based on the parts of the world where that civilization developed. We're also going to see the development of social classes. And social classes, like we talked about when we were introduced to grapes, is when groups of people are basically chunked together based off of either something they have in common or their financial standings within a society. It can be based off of their race. It can be based off of the fact whether they are male or female. And we're going to look at all of these aspects of civilization and how they came about for each civilization that we discuss. Make sure that you put something related to this civilization slide in your notes. And as you go through your guided notes, feel free to go back to the video, pause the video, fill in your notes, and watch this numerous times. Hope you enjoyed that quick lesson on culture.